Have fun, everyone.
Live streaming is on.
And it begins.
You are live. All right.
4 minutes to start time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there we are.
Good. That's muted. Good. I think we're up. Anyone else on YouTube can see?
Oh.
There's about a 3 or 4 second lag from what we see in our Jitsi feed to what's showing up on the screen.
I'm not seeing you on YouTube. Is anybody else?
Yeah, I did. You just have to refresh.
Okay.
And then, refresh, or just go, close it, go to the Crown Forces YouTube channel, and it should say down at the bottom, down a little bit, live.
I'm not seeing it.
Really? I found it.
Is it on? Is it underneath the video tab? Oh, live streams. Hold on. No, all I'm seeing is Tom's thing. It was from yesterday.
All right.
Yeah, that's in archive video, that one. So
I just
You're muted, Ewan. Ewan, you're muted. There you go.
It's in Crown Force North America. And then down a little bit. From there, it should say live now. Click
on the channel's page, or
yeah. As soon as you search it, it should show up. Ooh, it's Inception.
nice view of your big fat fingers, Ryan.
You're welcome.
Okay, yeah, there we go. There we go.
Yeah, that's funny. I couldn't find it on the page.
You had to search it.
When I just searched Crown Forces North America in the search engine, it came right up. So we might have to troubleshoot that for some people.
I'm only getting the video from last night.
Yeah, that's what I was getting too. So Ross, go to your YouTube search bar.
Yep, just Crown Forces.
Crown Forces North America, and it should be about the second or third thing that pops up.
And make sure you guys mute your mute the video on YouTube, otherwise you'll get twice the dialogue happening.
Yeah.
Yep, got it. Thank you.
All right. If we have people out there watching, we are about 1 minute to start time. I think we'll give it a couple of extra minutes before we kick off formally.
Are we able to see on YouTube how many people are watching?
Currently 13. Should just below the
oh yeah, it says
14
watching.
Hello everyone.
And I would think if someone joined late, I don't know if they pick it up at the start or if they can scroll back to the beginning of it. So.
You can scroll back to the beginning of it, as like a normal video. It'll just keep going on longer as the stream goes on longer.
Okay, good. Sort of the buffering effect. All right, well, I'm going to get rid of that. That's distracting seeing us out of the corner of my eye and the other monitor.
Oh, what are you watching? Oh, you mean you took down the YouTube?
Yeah, I just had the channel up to make sure we were streaming properly.
Actually, to get back to Ewan's question about my tie, I explained to you that my tartan ties were all badly creased, but so this is Paisley, like in Paisley, Scotland.
Really?
Really? That's what I'm going with, Craig.
Okay.
And then if wasn't bought in Paisley. Is it still Paisley, or is it just sort of like a sparkling tie?
Well, it's kind of the Scottish dysphoria, you know. We just sort of go everywhere, and so if you find Paisley, it's Scottish.
Really? Because I thought it came from India.
Well, they sort of had it for a while, and then they gave it up.
Yes. Because if the Scottish didn't invent it, they usurped it.
Yeah, well, that's our role.
Excellent.
What's the viewer count up to there now, Ryan?
It's up to 27, 28 around now.
27, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll give it another couple minutes. And then, Chris, you're monitoring emails, so we know if anyone's having trouble.
All I've got so far is Larry telling me he's on.
Yeah, Larry.
Hey, Larry.
That's Northern Larry.
Want to know?
Larry, you still owe me a beer.
Only one?
He's been promising it to me for 10 years.
Oh, it'll be well aged.
All right, we'll kick this off in about 1 minute or so, with the hope that any late arrivals can either watch the archive version of this, or they can buffer it back to the beginning and then catch up with us. Be a good time for a drums tune, Ross.
Oh, well, let me see now.
Maybe a Reveille or something.
Why did you set him up there, Tom?
Wanted to
Oh,
distract.
Right, you wound him all up now. He's getting all excited. The sporn is slowly rising in his lap.
oh, it's going faster than slowly. How about?
Hey guys, we don't want this video demonetized, okay?
Yeah.
All right, let's kick this off. So, welcome to everyone joining us on the Crown Forces North America channel. We're coming to you using various forms of technology. Want to point out that we have officers and NCOs from Crown Forces North America, and then also some various guests. So that's going to be Canadians on this call. We have some Americans and potentially even guests from the UK. And we may have some people from various disciplines. I know I invited Marty Land from the US Forces to join us as a guest, so that they are aware of what we're doing and what information that we are sharing. So I'm going to open this up with a few slides, to kick this off. Ideally, we would have loved to have done this in person, but, given the unusual times in which we're living, we thought it far better to have a virtual engagement rather than no engagement at all. So hopefully you agree with us. Bear with me a second. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so once again, welcome. Just want to give you some technical background. We're streaming on YouTube. It seemed to be the best way to have as many people participate. Also, it does give us the option to record this, so that if people were not able to join us, they can go back and watch the archive version of it. And then also, if you so choose, you can share it out to members of your groups or people in our broader community. I want to point out, if I had set this up properly, comments and chat have been disabled. The only way to run this has been to do it as an open public video, so there may be people we don't know popping in, watching, and we don't want people to disrupt this. I'm going to remind people that any questions or comments to email Chris McKay. I've shared that email address out in some of the lead up communications. Please, if you don't use your name as your email identity, please point out who it's from so that Chris can identify. There's a block of time you'll see in a moment for questions and answers. We will kind of gather, collate these questions and comments, and then Chris will present them to us during that time period, and we'll deal with them at that moment. So here's the agenda for today. So you see me doing the initial opening. Then Craig's going to offer some words. I'm going to give an update, what we know on the status of various events in our schedule this year. Ross has a few comments around the importance of standing orders and kind of where we are right now in terms of the new gun control law specific for Canada. Colin's going to review the changes made to the standing orders based on feedback and input from all of you and your reviews. Ewan is going to talk about our training curriculum with light infantry, what we would have been doing both classroom and out on the parade square at the school if we were able to have it. As I mentioned, we're going to have a Q&A. I'm going to talk for a few moments about unit staying engaged. Craig will offer some closing comments, and then as we finish up, then we'll transition to the pub. So did someone say pub? Somehow I can hear Abel Land echoing that out there. Immediately after the conclusion of the school, I sent a link for a JITSI meeting. We'll have a virtual pub. We appreciate that streaming on YouTube, cutting off comments, it doesn't really allow for a lot of face-to-face interaction. So then when we get to the pub, we'll have the opportunity for an open talk and can see each other there. So I hope you join us there. All right, just a note, obviously it's going to be a bring your own booze. I don't know the agenda is going to take all the time that we allotted for those different items. So, the sooner we finish, then the sooner we get to the pub. So at this point, I'm going to exit there and then ask Craig if he can offer us his opening remarks.
Thank you, Tom. Just going to check. You can hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Well, first of all, let me say welcome everybody who's come along. Thank you very much for participating today. It's a little bit different, yes, but I think this is probably the most reasonable answer to a very unreasonable situation. First, let me say thanks to Tom and Chris for organizing and building this virtual meeting. I think they've taken a lot of their own time to produce this for us, and if we were all in the same room, I'd ask you to give them a round of applause. So, gentlemen, assume that you've been given a round of applause. Thanks also to Colin and Ewan for their work developing their presentations today. Again, it's a lot of research, and it's a lot that they have to do to bring you a clear picture. Pardon me. And of course, the usual begrudging thanks to our Judge Advocate General for being there with info. It's been hard to sit and watch as one by one all our events have gone up on the bubble and then to see the bubble burst. We're still in limbo as to when we can once again get into the field, see one another. Maybe we'll be able to shake hands again someday. We're still in limbo about that, and I know we're itching to get out there, but we just have to wait and see. Tom, of course, is going to have some notes about what's coming up and what's on the bubble and so on and so forth. So I'm going to leave that to him. Suffice it to say that we've been in contact with the different sites all through this, and so far all of them held off canceling until it had become clear that there was no way to go forward. I guess they're being far more realistic than, say, Maple Leaf fans in the postseason. The staff have been continuing to keep engaged with each other and with you, and disseminating any info, good or bad, to the Crown Forces. And we will continue to do so. And so we watch and we wait. But as this meeting shows, waiting does not have to be static. We can take this opportunity to meet and go over points of interest to all of us. It doesn't have to stop there. This is the perfect time to work on your individual impression or repair gear. I've seen a number of people on Facebook posting their work in anticipation of getting back out in the field. It may suck to be stuck, but I, like so many of you, am using the time to do this. So take the opportunity, it's here. This is not the new normal. This is just like the 1918 pandemic. We will get out and out and about into in front of this eventually, and return to what we do best, which is really what we want to do. The CFNA continues to be, as you know, the envy of many other reenactment periods and groups. We have a cohesive relationship with site staffs, units from a broad range of places, and a staff that actually functions. And that is all because of you. You trust us to have that eye to safety, to looking for the most doable and interesting scenarios, and that we're doing all that we can to keep your experience the best it can be. And contrary to the mutterings of barrack room lawyers, sorry, Ross, the officers' mess tent is always open. Questions or problems can be brought here. Unless, of course, we're at the Grand Tactical and it's Saturday evening and we have that 1.5 hour to 2 hour window where we're hosting all the officers from all the different disciplines, both sides. Other than that, come in, talk to us. We want to hear what you have to say. And that's the time that if you have an idea to plug into the scenario, that's the time to bring it to us, not as we're marching out on the field. Because, of course, by the time we're marching out on the field, we've already established what we're doing with the other side. Anyway, I want to thank you all again for coming. And now I'm going to hand it back to Tom to give us this report on event statuses. Tom?
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate that. I'm going to go back to sharing my slides again. Bear with me a moment. All right, here's where we stand on events right now. So I guess some background information, and we probably all know this, but just a refresher, right? So that events are dependent on units from both sides of the Canadian and US border. At this time, the border is closed. Anyone that does, for example, enter into Canada is faced with an immediate 14-day quarantine. So that right there is a big limiting factor around the possibility of having events. If you follow sports, you see that's the reality that the Toronto-based sports teams are facing, and the unlikelihood of maybe seeing games in Toronto because visiting teams just can't face that quarantine. And then the other thing, as we watch the news and we see in some jurisdictions where restrictions are being eased, or if they talk about, for example, in Ontario, what that might look like, it's going to be done in a number of phases, and there isn't clear timelines as to the duration of these phases because they're going to be anxiously watching what the impact to the public is and how many cases are showing up. So this is the information, that the best that we know it. We'll continue to share information as we receive it. Quickly to review this, as you know, a couple of these things have already passed. The Officer NCO School was canceled. We've transitioned it to this virtual forum today. Longwoods was canceled, and naturally Longwoods would have had spectacular weather the weekend that we would have the event. I think this weekend is more Longwoods-like weather. Fort Meigs, a series of announcements. First, they announced that First Siege, the event, the opposed line event, was canceled. They still hope to have a recruiting weekend on that Memorial Day weekend, but they announced yesterday that that's also canceled because the restrictions haven't eased enough in Ohio to allow them to open that weekend for the event. Stony Creek has been canceled. Looking at Genesee Village, their event schedule, they've canceled things up until June 5th. No word on their planned War of 1812 event. Chrysler's Farm announced the other day that they've postponed their event to 2021. We've helped connect them with Fort George so we can talk about how to fit all these events in next year. Fanshawe, haven't made a formal announcement yet. And then a moment of trust here around the Grand Tactical in Sackix Harbor. I spoke to Connie, the site manager, this week. The event is going to be postponed to 2021. It's just that she is not in a position to make a formal announcement. The historic site there at Sackix Harbor is part of the New York State Bureau of Parks. They have a number of live events for the summer of 2020. And I think they're looking either to make a collective announcement or have a formal procedure on making announcements. So she's not in a position to formally say and to publish the postponement, but really for people worried about it or maybe had to make travel plans, the GT will not happen this year. It's going to be pushed until 2021. And we touched base with Jim Hill around the two planned events for Fort Erie in August. No formal cancellations yet. They're still hopeful that there'll be enough progress that they can have an event in some format, but really it's dependent on what the government and public health authorities are saying, and then they roll up to the Niagara Parks Commission. So they're dependent on all of that. That's really, we looked as far as August, not too far into the fall. For example, Dunvegan in the eastern part of the province, they're still hopeful that restrictions have eased enough so that they might be able to have an event, but they're not in a position to say yet. So that's what we know. As we learn stuff and have information, we'll share it. There's no point burning energy around speculation. I think we've been very forthcoming with announcements, and we will continue to do so. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ross, where he's going to cover off his part of the agenda.
Thank you, Tom. First of all, I want to thank Craig for his begrudging thanks to me earlier today. I'm not going to go into any depth about the standing orders because Colin's going to do that, and as part of the team that wrote up the and subsequently made amendments to the standing orders, he's in a better position than I. As most of you probably know, wasn't unusual for regiments and battalions to have their own standing orders, and so the fact that we have them, it shouldn't come as a big surprise. I think it's fair to say that the standing orders have been put together not only by some excellent people that are participating in this presentation today, but also they've given all of the groups who have wanted to an opportunity to have a say about what it is that was going to go in there. As I said a minute ago, it wasn't unusual for standing orders to be put together by regiments or battalions. What is different about ours in particular is that we have focused on elements that I will generically refer to as safety. And the reason for this, of course, is because unlike the 1812 period, when if you blew off your hand, it was just, okay, well, we'll go out and get another recruit. Things are a lot more litigious these days. And in addition, we want to make sure that as many of you who are participating in the hobby can do so as safely as possible. So as you will note, having read the standing orders, that there is a default to Parks Canada regulations or site-specific regulations. And that's because we are been looking for what are the best practices to ensure that we are as safe as possible. And also, we want to be in a position that if we can avoid an accident, we can, but in the event that there is an accident, we're in the best position to be able to say what it is that we did, why we did it, and be able to make sure that everybody is protected, if I put it that way, as possible. Even though we all have insurance, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the end of the story. So often when there's an accident, one of the things that is looked to is what is the industry standard? You know, why did you do what you did? And in this case, as I said, we've deferred to Parks Canada or site-specific regulations, and I think that's probably the best that we can do, and I think we're in a good position as a result of that. Having said that, it's not just okay for us to put these in a document and to post on a website. It's important for you, that is, those of you who are listening and participating today, that you know what these are and that your group knows what the procedures are. And that you, as one of the leaders of your unit, are prepared to enforce them. Because it's not possible, nor is it appropriate for the staff to be enforcing these. Because you, first of all, you need to be, when you show up, your people need to know what it is that is expected of them and how they should go about it. This is not something that you're sort of training on the spot for. So you have to make sure that every member of your unit now and all recruits in the future know what these safety precautions are and how to go about using them. And if you're not sure, then there are people that Tom has referred to, and that there are people that are doing presentations today that are available and have made it abundantly clear that they're available to answer questions that you have. So I think that's all I'm going to say about why we have some of these safety-specific aspects to our standing orders. I'm going to say only a couple of words about the new weapon regulations. We, as a collective group, that is the staff, have reached out to several strategic contacts to determine whether and to what extent the changes may affect our hobby. We don't have an answer to that yet. When we get some kind of definitive answer, then that'll be shared with everyone, and we'll make sure that that is shared as expeditiously as possible. To repeat something that Tom said a few minutes ago about some other aspect of our hobby right now, there's little point in speculation about how it is that these things may apply to us. The best advice is to wait and see. Of course, if any of you are interested in a legal opinion, I'm discounting my usual hourly rate to $400 an hour. So you know how to reach me if you do. And by the way, it's $400 plus a recruit for the drums. So after having said that, I'm going to turn it back to Tom.
Thank you, Ross. Now everyone knows why my bank account's near empty. He doesn't give me a discount. So. Okay, so the next on the agenda will be Colin and talking about the standing orders. So, Colin?
Thanks, Tom. Okay, everyone just bears with me for a second while I share my screen. Thanks, Tom. Okay, everyone just bears with me for a second while I share my screen. Make sure that that is, okay, good. So, okay, so everyone can see that okay? So, I am just going to be talking a little more detailedly about the standing orders, some of the process basically by which they have come about, basically sort of the reviewing process and sort of our methodology within reviewing it and correcting some things and getting as many Unix feedback as possible, and also some of the more major changes that have been made since we've started getting feedback from units about a month and a half ago now. So for those of you guys maybe who aren't aware, the Crown Forces standard, just a bit of background basically how they came about. They're written in lead up to the Waterloo Bicentennial back in 2015. Basically, we were asked if we had standing orders for the Canadian contingent was going over. We didn't have them at the time, and so we then went about writing one, and we've basically been developing and expanding it ever since. It has tried to emulate the look and format of many period standing orders, as Ross hinted. Some of the more readily available ones are online. There are the standing orders for the 85th Light Infantry. There was also some for larger formations. Crawford's Light Division in the Peninsula was one of the more better known ones. And so the document really does sort of try and take elements of a regimental standing orders, but also has more elements of a larger armies or formations general orders, because the Crown Force, if you know, is not simply just infantry. It also encompasses other units and other elements. And so this was written basically in the spring of 2015, but has been constantly evolving document with literally dozens of editions. If people can just look at my computer hard drive, you could be able to tell that I think last I counted there were 16 or 17 versions over the last 5 years. So it has been updated continually. And so firstly, we just wanted to thank everyone for the level of feedback in reading this document. The feedback we were getting were very helpful and very much appreciated. And it was clear that people did take the time to carefully read this document thoroughly and offered some great feedback. And it's probably because, as we've said, we all have a little more time on our hands right now than usual. So just quickly kind of going through our reviewing process and basically how this is going to come out to being sort of properly published. Chris McKay did email unit commanders on March 31st with the version of the standing orders at the time, and basically asked them to review the document and provide us feedback. He also asked unit commanders to let us know if they agreed to follow the policies and if their unit agreed, and also if they would therefore enforce the policies within their units. We received lots of feedback from pretty much every unit. And all have basically, who we've heard back from, have agreed to follow the standing orders, which is great. The units who we have not heard back from are ones that are largely located outside of Canada itself, and so unfortunately we just don't have as much ready communication with these guys, because unfortunately we just don't see these units as much. But we definitely appreciate their feedback and hope to hear back from them soon. Chris McKay will be sending out a reminder to those units we've not heard back from next week. And those units who we have not heard back from will have until until May 31st to respond. We have been working as a staff to incorporate and discuss as much of the feedback as possible and to update the document where it's appropriate. And the idea is that eventually we will be posting the final version in a PDF downloadable version form on the Crown Forces website by June 1st, and then that'll be there for people to use as a resource. But of course, questions about the document and clarification are always welcome any point after that. It is meant to be a resource, a guide, a place for units, individual members to go to look for reference, and it's always going to be there as a resource. So looking at some of the feedback, we got lots of great feedback. Actually, there was nothing overly negative or critical about the document, which was great, although we would have welcomed critiques as well. I'm sort of just going to address some of the sort of major areas of focus. There was lots of feedback but they did sort of tend to focus around several sort of key themes and areas of concentration. First, of course, there were a lot of small just little corrections, little changes to terms, a few little typos, small tweaks. Again, this is a document that has been organic, has been worked on for several years now, and so there have been some typos, missed commas, things like that. There's been a few changes, just simple things like terms, for example, changing the drum corps to the corps of drums, small wording changes, but basically nothing that actually affects the content of what is actually used or what is covered in the document, just little small details. There were a number of clarification points brought up about various drill and sort of procedural concerns, which I'll address a few. We actually go through the document in a second. There was also a number of questions and comments, feedback regarding safety regulations. And as Ross said, the safety regulations are probably the most important aspect of the document. I'll go through some of the things which we have done to highlight and to alter these from the feedback we've gotten. Particularly safety regulation regarding, again, Parks canister being the standard, clarifying the points of that, and also some clarification regarding cartridge size and manufacturing. There was a few points brought up just about we wanted to clarify and expand on our new fire alarms procedures and adding a few points of clarification. And also just a quick clarification, just clarify some issues about the officers and sergeants' daily states. So with that, I'm going to try and switch windows here and go to the actual document. And 1 second. Okay, so this is the document as it stands right now, the most recent version, updated as of April 11th, though we've actually made a few small tweaks since then. For anyone who maybe potentially hasn't actually seen the document, I'm not going to go through everything, but just give a quick idea of sort of what it actually covers. It has been written sort of, again, emulate the look and format of period standing orders and documents similar. So it covers basically the role of the staff and sort of the various positions and what each position covers. Article 3 here basically covers the various aspects of the formation of the battalion and how we as a Crown Forces battalion sort of work as a bunch of units together. There's some drill and uniform regulations here, some camp regulations, law of issues regarding safety. And so we're basically going through some of those now. So regarding drill, and if everyone has a document open themselves, they can follow this with me, but basically going down to page 14, which basically goes over our formation process by which the battalion actually forms up. There are a few spots where description of movements, such as the formation parade, have been altered to include the actual words of commands, just to add that much more accuracy and for clarifying the wording. One point being on page 14, the command now says the battalion will always parade in open column of companies right in front. That doesn't change what we're doing, it just adds the actual word of command rather than basically describing it, so just adds some accuracy there. There's also a point being added, the adjutant will then call the parade to attention, fix bayonets, shoulder arms, and wheel the battalion into line. There were a few other points of feedback about words commands, all of which have been addressed and corrected where appropriate. We do want to thank everyone who gave us feedback, because even if we didn't necessarily change anything, it did give us the opportunity to kind of go back and double check, triple check our research that might have been done several years ago, and just confirm that the word of command was in fact correct or written correctly. And it's always good to go back and sort of double check our research, especially stuff that was done, back during the bicentennial years. Now, one of the most important areas which we did elaborate, did a lot more second reviewing on, was regarding the safety regulations. Now, this is probably the biggest area of discussion, and our feedback was central law of safety and ammunition. And this is great because, of course, it all shows we recognize that this is probably the most important aspect of our hobby and our sort of collective training, to make sure we are all on the same page, to make sure we're all safe and we are ensuring best practices. And it's clear that people were reading these sections particularly very carefully and looking for any potentially missing information or words that might be a little bit vague or could be worded better. As we stated, we have now emphasized several points throughout the document that the Crown Forces are adhering to Parks Canada safety regulations, and these safety regulations, cover things like tactical demos, ammunition, weapons, artillery, things like that. And so on page 26, we have clearly said again that Parks Canada will be the guy we're hearing to. They were developed by Parks Canada years ago. They've been updated since. They're used at sites like Fort George, which we frequent, often, and who we have close contact with regarding safety matters. And we have adopted these as our minimum standard, and we cannot change them. Basically, from a legal point of view, we need to adhere to Parks Canada. And so on page 26, just to actually read out what it now says Parks Canada has researched and developed extensive black powder safety guidelines for use on its sites. The CFNA have adopted these as our minimum standard required by all units, and see Appendix 3, in which case where the Parks Canada guidelines are actually stated. It also says that CFNA units will abide by all black powder fire safety rules as designated by sites in the event that there are more stringent than Parks Canada's minimum. We do frequent other sites that are not Parks Canada, and if by chance they have regulations which are more stringent than what Parks Canada is as default, we will of course adhere to those sites which we are using for the weekend. Now, there were also several comments brought up regarding ammunition and some points of clarification within the original document, particularly around cartridge size and manufacturing. So with respect to cartridges, Parks Canada says within the appendix, Parks Canada said that the maximum cartridges should be maximum size of 125 grains. However, Parks Canada, Crown Forces is recommending that cartridges for our purposes be no larger than 100 grains. And we've also added in addition that note for rifles should be using smaller loads, smaller charges, which is highlighted right here. So again, ammunition consisting of pre-made cartridges should be between 70 and 100 grains of black powder is recommended. Smaller loads for rifles, under no circumstances any musket balls or any other type of projectile be included in this ammunition or fired at events. And we've also know within Appendix 3, which has the Parks Canada safety regulations, which reiterates a lot of this stuff. A footnote has been noted at the bottom, which states that while Parks Canada has a maximum cartridge size of 125, CFNA is recommending maximum load of 100. There was also concern about the idea of making paper cartridges with either with glue or staples. We have consulted our contacts with Parks Canada about this, and they have clarified that using a little bit of glue to make cartridges is fine, because it will be burnt up when the projectile is fired. But under no circumstances should staples ever be used, because those would potentially be a projectile. And so the Parks Canada regs within Appendix 3 have now been altered to say, and highlighted here, only blank cartridges should be used. Cartridges for black powder musket should not exceed 125 grains of double F black powder. Paper cartridges must not use staples. They must be made in a correct historical manner. So hopefully that clarifies any areas of concern. Once again, basically glue is fine. A little bit of glue is fine, but staples under no circumstances. Now, jumping back up to page 26, which is right here. We added a few extra points regarding our new fire alarm procedure, which has been developed the last couple of years. We have added a point on page 26, which simply just says it was recommended that all units provide themselves at least one fire extinguisher to have on hand in case there is a fire emergency, which of course is always good practice. We have also clarified this. This was talked about, and we thought, and we're pretty sure everyone knew this, but wanted to clarify again that the rallying points for all units in the case of fire alarms should be the sergeant's tent at the end of their tent rows, and so both of those sections are now highlighted in this section under emergency procedures and for fire alarms. And the last small point of clarification, which we sort of focused on, was in the appendixes regarding officers and sergeant states. There was a couple times of previous years where there's a little bit of confusion, and we just want to reiterate that if your unit does not have an officer, or if for some reason your officer is not at a particular event, the sergeant or whoever is in charge of the unit at that event is responsible for providing both the officer's company state, which, as we know, includes the whole recreated unit. So that's men with muskets and arms, the rank and file, any civilians, women, children, basically everyone in the camp. So we have an idea of all personnel within the camp. And then they would also be required to submit their sergeant states as per normal. And so there is just a footnote at the bottom of that page, which reiterates that. And Appendix 4 and 5 basically have the officer and sergeant states respectively, which can be downloaded and printed out for use at events. And so basically that goes over most of the major changes. Again, there was a few small tweaks, but those are sort of the main areas of focus. We kind of suspect and hope that safety was going to be the main area we wanted feedback on to make sure everyone was on the same page. But again, once again, I wanted to really thank everybody. As one of the main writers of this document 5 or 6 years ago, I'm quite happy that it's finally coming to fruition. It's going to be finally getting off my desktop and becoming a reality. And so pending any other major feedback, this is sort of the state of the standing orders, and expect that those should be posted on the Crown Forces website in a downloadable PDF by June 1st or the beginning of June. So that's it. Thanks everybody for the feedback. We really do appreciate it. We really want to try and incorporate everyone's feedback as much as possible. And so once again, thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Appreciate that. And then I'm going to join everyone else, and where I'm also going to say, thank you for all the feedback, the diligence that people had in looking at this document, reviewing it, I just find it amazing whenever we're editing, how much we can look at something and review it over and over and over again and keep finding little typos or little mistakes or things that need to be corrected. So thanks again. At this point, we're going to transition to Ewan, who's going to talk about light infantry and what we had hoped to do with our training curriculum this year. So Ewan?
Yeah, I'm just going to get my screen up. All right. Everyone can hear me? So this year we were going to be focusing on the light infantry exercise. Now, a lot of people might be wondering why this year in particular. The rationale behind it was that in the last couple of years, we've been seeing an increased emphasis by units on getting the guys to practice the light infantry exercise and requests by those units to perform in such a capacity on the field. Now, of course, this is not everyone, and this is not all units. The main thing I want to get across is that the purpose of the exercise of getting everyone on the same page was so that those units who are interested in perfecting the light infantry exercise they already do or wanting to learn it will have an opportunity again to ensure that there's consistency across the board. But those units who are not interested, or those units who are for various reasons disinclined to take on a light infantry role, they don't have to do it whatsoever. Again, the purpose of the school this year was to allow those units who were interested to get involved. So one of the things that obviously comes up is what period sources should we be relying on? There are a number of period light infantry and rifleman manuals that are now available online. Many of these were not readily available even 10 years ago. So with all this material that's now at our fingertips, it could be a little confusing to determine which manuals we should emphasize and which ones we can consider supplementary. And I'll use the example of a manual that I know a lot of people seem to have a copy of, and that is A Practical Guide for the Light Infantry Officer by Thomas H. Cooper, 1806. This is probably the most influential light infantry manual among 1812 reenactors right now. It was beautifully reproduced in 1970, and since then has been generally more widely available than other more historically important works. Now, Cooper was a regular officer, but he writes in the introduction to his manual that the principal design of his study was to exhibit and compress the light infantry maneuvers for the benefit of the British volunteers. So he's talking about the militia, the volunteers, the yeomanry. So this manual was written for, if you will, part-time soldiers. This manual wasn't written with a professional audience in mind. It was written for those individuals who are volunteering in the defense of the realm, but professions were not full-time military. They were these volunteer units like the militia, like the yeomanry. Now, A Practical Guide was recommended reading for British infantry officers at the time of its publication, but it never attained official recognition by the Army beyond that. So again, this is a great example of where modern reenactors need to be careful when using some of these sources. We have to know their historical context. We have to know who they were written for. And this is especially important if they contain elements that actually contradict or stray away from official regulations. So Cooper's my example, but there are other ones out there that kind of reflect this. So what were the regulations? Well, according to the general regulations and orders for the Army, each infantry officer was to have in his possession copies of the rules and regulations for the formation, field exercises, and movements of His Majesty's forces. That was issued on the 1st of June, 1792. They were also to have a copy of the regulations for the exercise of riflemen and light infantry and instructions for their conduct in the field, issued on the 1st of August, 1798. And lastly, the manual and platoon exercises issued the 1st of November, 1804. And then, of course, there were general orders that were produced that would amend some of these documents. Each infantry sergeant was to have in his possession a copy of the rules and regulations for the manual and platoon exercises, formations, field exercises, and movements of His Majesty's forces, issued on the 1st of January, 1807. This last manual was an abstract of both the 1792 rules and regulations and the 1804 manual and platoon exercises. So these are the regulation, the manuals, the by regulation that each infantry officer and each infantry sergeant was to have in their possession. So let's talk about the first one now, the rules and regulations, 1792. So this forms the basis of all the drill used by the British infantry from the early 1790s to the early 1820s. Now, the light infantry exercise only takes up 9 pages of it, and 1.5 pages of the complementary 1804 manual and platoon exercise. So not a lot of space is devoted to light infantry stuff. Nevertheless, we should see these instructions as foundational to our understanding of the light infantry drill practiced by the British Army during the War of 1812. You'll notice that the image I have there is of an 1815 edition of the 1792 rules and regulations. This is the edition I personally use, and that's because, as you can see on the cover there, cover page there, it has all the general orders that were implemented over the course of the early 19th century that were amendments to the rules and regulations. The manual and platoon exercise, as I said, only has a couple pages specifically devoted to light infantry, and they address loading and firing in 2 ranks kneeling. And I have a later 19th century image of light company soldiers doing just that. Now, for those who are inclined, I've actually copied all those pages, all 12 pages that you find in the 1792 rules and regulations and the 1804 manual platoon exercises on the blog I keep to help with the senior NCOs of the hobby. So the sergeant's mess, or one word, .wordpress.com. So you can go there. It's one of the more recent posts. I have all the relevant pages up on that website. I have also put up some other articles, what am I saying? Blog posts recently addressing light infantry subject matter. Now, going on to one of the other manuals we saw according to regulations, we have the regulations for the exercise of riflemen and light infantry. This was authored by Francis de Rottenberg, and he had considerable influence on this manual, had considerable influence on all later light infantry manuals. It was the official rifleman and light infantry manual for the Army until the 1820s, but it merely supplemented the rules and regulations. De Rottenberg makes quite clear that his work is to focus more specifically on the light infantry exercise, but that you have to use the 1792 rules and regulations alongside with it. He's very clear about that. So if you're a modern reenactment unit and you're already using de Rottenberg as the basis of your light infantry drill, you should also still have a full grasp of the 1792 rules and regulations to stay true to your historical counterparts, the people you are portraying. Now, the conversation could end there, but it doesn't. And I'm going to go into sort of the next section here. But before I go any further, I just want to put out a few quick thanks to some of the people who have helped me in sort of developing where we are right now when it comes to our standing of light infantry in at least the hobby here in Canada. These people include Anton DeGiusi, Greg Renault, Eamon O'Keefe, Andrew Blake, and the others over at the 2nd 95th Rifles Forum. And lastly, the fine librarians at the Special Collection with the University of New South Wales. I just want to acknowledge those people before I move on. So you have 2 other light infantry manuals that sort of come to prominence at the latter half of the Napoleonic Wars, and that's what we're going to be talking about now. The first of those is a course of drill and instruction in the movements and duties of light infantry, 1808. Offered by Neil Campbell. Campbell had served in both the 95th Rifles and the 43rd Light Infantry. He was present at Shorncliffe Camp and was a close friend of Sir John Moore. The manual is a compilation of the drill practiced by the 95th Rifles and subsequently the Light Infantry Brigade under Moore at Shorncliffe. In fact, in this first edition of it, the 1808 edition of A Course of Drill, you'll notice that he doesn't actually apply his name here. He just says by a field officer. And that's because he doesn't want to take any credit for the work that other officers did in formulating the drill practiced by the 95th and then practiced by the Light Brigade. So he did apply his name to the second edition, but not to the first. This instruction was also used in the training of Portuguese cazadores in the peninsula, and reputedly it was used by all light infantry regiments as the only standard of reference for uniformity of movement and practice until 1824, until the new infantry manual was published. That statement seems to be confirmed in a June 1823 general order by the Commander-in-Chief of Bombay, which asserts that this manual was approved by the highest military authorities in England and directed that this manual should be adopted by the Presidency's army, so by the armies of Bombay, the Army of Bombay, as well as it recommended to be that it should be in the possession of every officer. The second edition of this manual was published in 1813, but under a different title. It was Instructions for Light Infantry and Riflemen. Now, the next manual I'm going to talk about is A System of Drill and Movements as practiced in the 52nd Light Infantry Regiment. This work was written by John Cross, who had served in the 52nd throughout the Peninsula and at Waterloo. Cross was credited as helping Sir Henry Torrance incorporate the system developed at Shorncliffe Camp into the 1824 field exercises, so into the manual that the Army-wide manual that was introduced in 1824. And although this work was published in 1823, it is purportedly showcased what was adopted by the 52nd at Shorncliffe and practiced by the regiment later in the Peninsula and the Low Countries. We know that at least one other light infantry regiment, the 90th, was being taught the light infantry drill according to the system of the 52nd shortly after the war. Also, there's a reference to the soldiers of the 33rd Regiment in the Low Countries just prior to Waterloo being trained elements of light infantry firing and loading by NCOs of the 52nd. So the 52nd seems anecdotally to have a bit of an impact on the training of other regiments. The 52nd very much was seen as a bit of an elite at the end of the Napoleonic Wars, and other regiments were trying to emulate their system. Now, some further observations on these two works. They build off the instructions found in the 1792 Rules and Regulations and de Rottenburg's regulations for the exercise of riflemen. So unlike some of the other manuals you may come across, again, these are building off what was the established regulations at the time. They embody the system of drill and maneuver perfected under Sir John Moore at Shorncliffe Camp and the experience gained fighting the French in the 1790s. So these manuals were based off the practical experience that had been gained by officers beginning with the French Revolutionary War, and then also the systematic training that was conducted under Moore's supervision at Shorncliffe Camp. They were meant for a professional military audience as opposed to amateurs. These two manuals were written with a military audience in mind, with infantry officers in mind. They both received degrees of official recognition by the Army, and they probably best represent the drill practiced by the light infantry and riflemen in Wellington's armies in both the Peninsula and the Low Countries, and consequently very likely represent what was also practiced here in British North America during the War of 1812, especially in the case of those regiments who would have been coming from Europe at the end of the War of 1812 and 1814. So these two manuals, the reason they are sort of lesser known is they haven't been readily available online. Both manuals haven't been digitized and published online by the institutions that have them. And so consequently, they're tougher to find, they're tougher to kind of track down and search for. Now, you can find one of them if you know where to look. So in the case of Campbell's manual, it was actually copied verbatim by C.K. Gardner in 1816 and used in the Regulations for Light Infantry and Riflemen of the United States Army. So if you knew to look at an American manual, you could find the British manual. But anyway, these two works, again, they weren't as easily accessible, or haven't been as easily accessible. So consequently, they by and large kind of gone unnoticed until fairly recently. If anyone is interested in receiving a copy, I know some of us already have them, but receiving a copy of one or both, they're welcome to contact me via my email, and I'd be happy to share with them a digital copy of either or all of these manuals. Now let's look at what we were going to do at the school. We were going to be training at the school using the Campbell and Cross as our guides. And so the agenda for Saturday was going to be to load, file, kneeling, sitting, and lying down, to file upon the spot, to file advancing and retiring by the whole line or by alternate ranks, to extend, close, and skirmish, and to do all the above in double files or chain order. So that was what we were going to be covering on Saturday at the school. For the Sunday, we were going to offer sort of an advanced school for those units who wanted to participate. It wasn't mandatory for those units who wanted to participate. We were going to be addressing all the topics that were covered on Saturday. And then depending on the numbers we had, we were going to try advancing and retiring in sections using reserve and support elements. So it was potentially going to be a lot of fun, but of course didn't happen. So for those who have copies of a course of drill or a system of a drill, the sections that apply to what we were going to be covering at the school are listed on the screen right now. So for Campbell's work, it was going to be Part 2, Sections 1, 2, and 3, pages 55 to 79. And then in Cross's work, a system of drill, it was going to be 3rd Division, Lessons 2, 39 to 59, and Lesson 3, 61 to 68. Lesson 2 in particular focuses on the manual of arms and the platoon exercise, and I was going to cover elements of that at the school. So I just want to thank everyone for that, for my presentation, for sitting through this. I'm sure it was absolutely riveting. And you are, of course, welcome to contact me at any time should you have any questions, comments, and concerns about what I just talked about. Anyway, let me stop sharing and turn it back over to everyone else.
All right, thanks, Ewan. So we're at the point where I guess we can do question and answers. Chris, if you could maybe share the questions, and I don't know if you want to designate the person that you think is in the best position to answer, or otherwise then we'll work that through ourselves. For people watching the stream, just so that you understand, there seems to be about a 15 to 20 second lag between live time and what you're seeing over YouTube. You know, when we practiced with the technology, it wasn't quite that pronounced. So I don't know if it has something to do with the number of viewers or how busy YouTube happens to be right now. So Chris, if you can unmute, and then let's dive into the questions.
All right, thanks, Tom. Everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
So the first one, I'll just go through by sections. I've tried to sort them into who did the presentation. So the first one on events from Mr. Carrero was not a question but a comment. He wanted everybody to know that the engagement at Bradley, scheduled for October 3rd and 4th, is still pending. So much like those August and September events that we already talked about, it's still pending. We will see what happens based on what the city and the province decides. The next two questions relate, Tom, I'm going to ask, maybe you have any details. Have we heard anything from Bacchus Mills? Again, a September event. And once we hear from Sackett's, will Fort Niagara be covered under that as well? Tom, maybe you could speak to either of those.
Sure. First off, Bacchus, I went to their website and saw no updated information there. I don't really have a contact name for anyone at Bacchus. So at this point, I would say that that's still pending. And really, once we got to Fort Erie time-wise, I didn't investigate too much further because there's just so many variables in what the state of the world might be at that time. Fort Niagara, we have not heard from them. While they are in a New York State park, I believe, as Connie explained it to me, they are independently operated by a committee or an organization, so they aren't necessarily held to the same management or governance that she is. So we have not heard from Fort Niagara yet around an event status there.
Okay, thank you. So the next one I'm going to try to answer a little generally myself, and then maybe Ross, we can turn to you. This was your section. I had a couple questions about the gun control legislation. And the first one is, because we have so many Americans, I think, tuning in with us, one of the questions was, do we know if or how this will affect the U.S. Reenactors crossing into Canada? So to give kind of a general answer at this point, obviously, based on what Ross said, we don't really know what's happening yet. We're still in a wait and see, but we can certainly add that to our list of questions that we're pushing out to our various authority figures that Ross mentioned. Ross, do you have anything to add to that answer, which kind of non-answer?
No, I think it's fair to say that there's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot we can speculate on. We can even form our own opinion about what the outcome is. But that and a couple of bucks will buy you a coffee at Starbucks. What we really need is a question of, is an answer from those people that have made the law, and that is some government source that is going to be able to give us something that we can rely on and go forward with. And unless and until we get that, then we're all just speculating about how it might apply or even if it applies.
Thank you. Ross, there was another one about sort of the same topic, but I'm going to leave it for the end because I think it's maybe a little bit bigger discussion question. I'm going to turn to the standing orders now. Again, I'm going to start to answer this one myself, and then Colin, maybe I will, or actually, Ross, I might call on you to answer this one as well again. So I had a question from somebody in the artillery, and he was asking about essentially there are sites, we still know there are sites that push the artillery to fire faster than the Parks Canada safety rules would indicate. And he was just saying, the question is, we need to reiterate that the Parks Canada are absolute minimum. So he was asking about sites that don't have as stringent safety guidelines. And so I think we need to reiterate that this is what we were asking unit commanders to do when we sent out the safety orders. The standing orders. As Ross said, it's really up to the unit commanders to enforce those, and so that's what we were asking you to do. Do you accept these standing orders, and are you willing to enforce the safeties within your unit? So when it comes to the artillery, it's going to be the same. If you've said, "Yep, we're willing to accept these standing orders and these safety rules," the Parks Canada safety rules is our minimum, then that's up to you to establish that within your unit. Now, that being said, and Ross, this is where I'm going to turn to you. If there are sites that are pushing you to beyond what you feel is safe for your unit, please, absolutely, we are happy to help as a staff. Come to any one of us, and we will do our best. Part of our job is liaison with the site. So if that's a problem that you're not comfortable with, please come to us. But at the end of the day, it's got to be your responsibility. Ross, is all that fair?
It is. A couple of points. First of all, one thing that I forgot to mention, and that is this, that where you have sites that do not specifically say that, well, we're going to follow Parks Canada, if the site's rules have gaps in it that are filled by something from Parks Canada, then you should default to what Parks Canada has to say about that particular issue. So at the end of the day, the default is always to Parks Canada. The second point about, well, what happens if a site essentially has lower safety standards, if you will, than Parks Canada. I think my advice to you, and again, this legal advice is, what you pay for, is that it's worth what you pay for, rather, is that you still default to Parks Canada. The whole point of us going through this exercise is not just to protect the people that are doing the presentation on this, as the staff, but also to help to protect you and the people that you lead. And the industry standard, as far as black powder is concerned in Canada, comes from Parks Canada. And so if a site asks you to do something that actually runs contrary to what Parks Canada says, then I think you should take the position that you have safety standards that are higher, or at least are more onerous than what they require. And that is something that you feel strongly about in terms of following. So like I said, you should always defer to Parks Canada, either in the absence of something from the site, or where the site's regulations appear to have a less stringent standard than Parks Canada. But again, as a lawyer, the last thing you want to do if there's an accident is to get into a pissing contest about why it is that you did not follow the safety standards that you signed up for, and why it is that you instead followed what the site had, because you better believe that they'll push back, and so you'll end up in a, well, they asked me to do this. Well, why did you do it? You're not being paid. You have your own, you had already said what you're going to do. So anyway, that's my comment on that.
Thanks, Ross. And I just got a note from Matt Pindera as well, who's not on Jitsi right now, but he is watching live. And of course, Matt's supporting that position as well. And again, Matt's probably your go-to guy if you're having issues with the site, right? But any one of us are happy to help you. Next question, I'm not really sure. It again on the standing orders, so maybe I'll default to Colin, but I'm not sure. This is certainly not my area of expertise. In the standing orders, somebody's asking if we should specify the size of a fire extinguisher. And I must admit, I have no idea how fire extinguishers are even measured. Colin, do you know? Can you help us on that one?
I don't. I mean, we could specify a standard size one. I think they do sort of make pocket, like condensed mini ones, but I'm going to say like a standard one you would have in a home. But we can specify. I'm not. We can look into it, but I would say a normal sized one you would see in any sort of residential house or something. But that we could add a point, but we'd have to look into what exactly fire extinguisher size and classifications are. But
So-
not an industrial one that is a reasonable one to purchase and to have on hand and to lug around to events.
So if I can add, how about we take that as a follow-up? You know, we do have access to some resources. I'm thinking someone like Lawrence, you know, who worked as a firefighter in the city of Hamilton. Maybe he can give us some guidance, minimum size, type of fire extinguisher, and then probably what would be good advice too would be tips for how are they maintained? You know, do they have to be checked periodically? Should they be replaced, especially consumer ones? Or are they meant to be more disposable and they're not effective after a couple of years? So we'll take that as a follow up and get some clarification there.
Okay, thanks, Tom. I'm also getting a message from Matt Pindera on that one. Also, sort of an expert in the field. So we'll talk that over ourselves and get back to that one. Next question again, safety orders. So the question was, one of the period manners of tying cartridges is that there's actually string at the bottom. Now, my understanding, and maybe Ewan or Colin, you can clarify that, the string was just to tie the cartridge between the powder and the ball. And not necessary for actually making a cartridge without a ball.
Sources seem to vary on the exact way that at least British cartridge. There seems to be a lot of discrepancy. Yes, there was definitely string to tying between the paper and between the powder and the ball. You see some where there's also string at the bottom, at the other side of the ball. So, if any units, I mean, I wouldn't think you need string to make modern blank cartridges, and I'm not aware of any units that do. But I mean, if there were, I mean, as long as it is natural string that will then burn up, I don't see it being a problem. But again, I also don't see it as being necessary.
I'm going to wade in again. I think similar to staples, that string has the potential to be a projectile. I would say no. You know, and these are safeguards in the event someone does ram paper or drop the cartridge, because of course we're not putting, when we're opposed line, we're not putting paper down the barrels, but you know, we're just taking away the possibility of an accident or an incident. So, you know, a little bit of glue that might burn with the paper is one thing, but I think once you start talking string or staples, you're increasing the risk. So I would suggest that no string be involved.
But as one of the people who have often checked cartridges at various battalion inspections, I haven't seen any units that I can recall who use string. So if people are just acquiring as a historical basis for it, fine, but I don't think we need string for blank cartridges, no. And we shouldn't be using it anyway.
Okay, thanks, guys. Maybe we can, I'll put a note to add that to the standing orders. The next one, I believe, Colin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we discussed this one. And it's a question regarding musket training at events. So we've got a note in the standing orders that essentially says we shouldn't be firing outside of controlled situations, tactical demonstrations, essentially. And the question is, what about a unit that wants to train somebody in firing, but doesn't want to do that on the field? Is that a possibility? Colin, I'm going to actually go to Craig first. That's right. Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, usually with sites, when you go to an event, if you need to do like to clear somebody on firing the musket or give them some stick time, as it were, if you come to us or the sergeant major, he can contact the event organizer and find out if there is a range area where you can actually do this without endangering anybody. Usually sites are pretty good about this, but just don't just go ahead and do it. Just come and ask, and make sure we get you a cleared range. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And we can, again, Colin, we'll make a note to incorporate that into the standing orders.
Yeah, we will.
So the next one, again, I'm not really sure who to turn to for this one, but maybe we can use Craig's method of putting up our hand. So the question was, if a unit wants to, in the Crown Forces, if we need to incorporate PPE into our impression, how and can we do that without without ruining our impression, essentially? Which I think is an interesting question, but I'm not sure it's something we can really answer simply here. Go ahead, Craig.
I'm thinking that if you still have to wear PPE, we probably shouldn't be out there doing it. I think, you know, particularly if even if you make yourself a cloth mask out of a period belcher or something like that, you know, now you have a piece of cloth on your face that can catch fire. I'm not really down with that. I really think that if we're still wearing PPEs, I don't think that we should be standing that close together anyway.
Also, from a practical standpoint, you can't exactly bite open a cartridge with your mouth covered, so it literally wouldn't work either. So,
yeah.
I am just taking a second. I've got some more emails that have come in the last couple seconds, so I'm just scrolling through them. So give me a second, please. Lots of emails. Lots of people saying that a 5-pound fire extinguisher, 5-pound ABC fire extinguisher is the one you probably want to go with. Got that one. Got it. Got it. Got it.
Trade it.
Got it. Need it. Got it. Want it. I think I'm going to go back to my Word document. I think we've covered all the questions that I got, although I'm still getting texts coming in. All right. So I guess the message is, if I missed your question, I apologize. And also, Ewan's really disappointed that nobody's asking him questions about light infantry drill. If we could have some more of those, that'd be great. But if I did miss your question, I apologize. Please feel free to send it again, and we'll get to it at some point. And Tom, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. I guess we're at the point where on the agenda, we're close to closing this out. We're probably going to finish a half hour early, which is fine. That gets us a half hour closer to a beer, which I'm looking forward to, a chance to share a beverage with you all. You know, I think we've seen it with this forum. Hopefully it helps you feel a little bit connected, a little bit informed, and still part of this hobby that we all miss so much. But I think it's really important that as unit commanders, as NCOs, that you're doing much the same within your groups. I hope you are. There are video conference tools, this Jitsi, for example. I know some different groups are using that. very much like Zoom, with the exception that this is open source software, which is a fancy way of saying it's free. So that makes it appealing in that regard. I know as a staff, we've had staff meetings by video conference, but we've also had some social time. I know the 49th Grenadiers have had a couple of pub nights. I know the 41st had a virtual campfire. Ewan hosted a sergeant's mess. So it's not ideal, and we'd much rather be around a real campfire at a site, but there are ways to stay engaged. So please do reach out if you need some ideas or help, and more than happy to share that with you. At this point, Craig, I'm going to ask you to maybe a couple closing comments, and then once you finish that, then I'll share some details again on our virtual pub. So, Craig?
Thank you, Tom. First of all, once again, let me thank everybody who brought input to this today. Thank you, Tom, Chris, for setting it up. Thank you, Ewan, for that monumental plow through, and Colin, amazing job as always. Thank you very much, sir. Chris, thanks. Ross, thanks, and thank everybody who has tuned in to watch this today. I guess I know that I miss reenacting, but I also miss all of you. I miss seeing you. I miss spending time with you. I miss the campfire. I miss having a drink with you. I guess this is where you say, cue the music and Verilyn starts singing "We'll Meet Again." But I think the most important thing is stay safe, stay well. This thing will get ahead of it. They got ahead of the 1918 pandemic. We'll get ahead of this. And we'll see you as soon as we can. Okay. And now, Tom, let's get pissed.
All right. With that in mind, I got a couple of slides to close us out. Good. All right. So our virtual pub, you might have noticed I called that the Leek and Thistle. And then I talked about this a little bit at the recruiting workshop we had back in, I guess it was February. So some background. The staff have bought a marquee with the idea that it could be a mess. So, our thinking behind that was on Friday evenings, it's open to everyone. And we looked to a couple of very sociable sergeants to maybe be the host of the Leek and Thistle mess or pub in Abel Land and Ryan Clark. But the idea, it's a gathering place. It's a spot for people from across the hobby to come together and share a drink. And we thought that'd be a good name for our virtual pub, which we'll go to in a moment. But then, when we're at events again, and we do have the Leek and Thistle, then there's some broader purposes too. So, through the day, the Saturday and the Sunday, it will act as a recruiting pavilion where we can have some people man it to have deal with inquiries from the public. We'll have some tables in there. Units can have their brochures, maybe some posters or banners, just a way to help get the word out and help us attract membership. As Craig alluded to, we might set aside some time that the officers will have a defined mess time for a formal mess, but that's not going to consume the entire Saturday night, where once again it will become an open gathering place. So in the spirit of the Leek and Thistle, our virtual pub, there's the link there again. It's a Jitsi meeting room where no one's muted, blocked. We can see each other and interact with each other. I'm going to close this meeting off in a moment and need about 2 or 3 minutes to pour myself a beer, and then I'll open up that meeting site. So Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know this isn't ideal or optimal. I hope it's a reasonable facsimile of what we might have been able to do at the school. And as Craig said, we miss you all. We miss our hobby and can't wait to get together again. But we're going to do that when it's safe and prudent to do so. So happy Saturday. I do hope you join us in the pub. Send me an email if you don't have the link. I can resend it to you. But I think we've gotten it out there enough times. So with that, I'm going to stop the stream in 3, 2, 1.